I've never met a single person who told me, I love getting up in the morning at 9 a.m., opening up 10 websites and then copy pasting data into a spreadsheet. And it's archaic to me that we still have people doing that in 2025.
AI, it's a game changer that us as humans had never seen something so powerful. I think it'll fundamentally shift what it means to be a human.
AI means you will have to better understand computational thinking. I think almost everyone's jobs are going to become more like engineering, right? If you go interview the best sellers at all of the best companies, you'll find the same trend over and over again, which is that more than sell, what they do is they educate. Because ultimately what salespeople in today's world have become are really just highly informed educationers, teachers.
Coaches. I like the word coaches.
Coaches is a much better word. If you look at the trend of go-to-market over the last, let's say 2 decades, cold outbound was the hottest thing on the market 15 years ago. The reason it was the hottest thing on the market is because no one else was doing it.
Hey, Yash, how's it going? Good to see you, man.
Going well.
So you're based out of New York, right?
Yes. What about you guys?
We are based out of Delhi, the NCR Gurgaon region in India. Have you been here?
Nice. Yeah. I'm very familiar with it. My mom's sister lives around there.
Lovely. Okay, that's good to hear. Let me just quickly introduce you to what we do, and we'll get quickly into the conversation. We have 100,000 people mailing list and close to about 50,000 people that follow us on social media, and this is Edbound with Kinner. So Edbound basically is how we believe the motions are going to change, from inbound, outbound to Edbound. Edbound is basically layered with educational content. So you have deep content like webinars, online courses, ebooks, white papers, and that's what people would use to acquire leads. And I think you have a fantastic background, Yash. You've dabbled in edtech. You're kind of the founding GTM engineer for this legendary product Clay. So welcome to Edbound with Kinner. So man, Clay, legendary, right? I think you've been here for a while and you kind of led data research, and now I see GTM engineering. This part of the world, I think it would be fantastic if you could just, in your words, talk a little bit about the magic of Clay. I literally feel it's magic. I've used it for a couple of workflows, but I would love to hear it from you. And if you could introduce yourself, you have a stellar background, my friend. You've been a founder, you've studied at some amazing universities and done some ultra amazing engineering stuff. So I think those two.
Yeah. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So I think I'll do intro first quickly, and then we can talk a little bit about the magic of Clay. I'm Yash. I have a background all over the place. I like to say it's a jack of all trades or a generalist type skill set. I started out in ed tech. I was a high school teacher, and I also built an online apprenticeship business. And then after that, was a data scientist, hopped around management consulting, worked with Seth Godin over at Alt MBA, which was one of the best online courses I think I ever took as a student, and had the incredible honor to also work with him as a coach and as a journalist after that. And I've done too many things. I'm not going to list my whole resume here, but hopped around venture capital, did some work back in data, did some product work, and then found my way ultimately to Clay, which was through Varun, one of the co-founders, who was a close friend. And he had just discovered Clay himself. And this was, you have to remember, I think the first time I was introduced to Clay was really 3 years ago. And so Clay was a very different product back then. It was more of a Rose competitor than it was what it is today, which is to say it was just a spreadsheet with APIs. It was much more horizontal. There was no focus on GTM whatsoever. And it was powerful in what it was capable of doing, but not focused enough in any one way to be extraordinary to any one person. And so a lot of that is actually Varun and Kareem, right around the time I met Clay, were focusing and pivoting on where the product would go. They started to really dial in on the people that were seeing the most value at that time, which were cold outbound agency owners, because they felt the problem of outbound X larger than even your regular business owners do, because they're doing it at scale across multiple clients and multiple companies. And you have to remember, Clay at that time, we didn't have people or companies' data sets. We didn't even have waterfall enrichments, but it was still an incredible product in the sense that back then, I still thought it was magical because I was able to build waterfall enrichments myself using AI formulas and JavaScript and Clay. And so it's come a long way from there. And I think it's become even more magical. But I think what really excites me the most about the product is when I first came into Clay, it was able to replace and augment all of these internal systems I had built myself at some of the agencies I was at. So in a pre-Clay world, we were feeling so much of the outbound pain at the agency I worked with, and we were doing it across, dozens of clients, that I had built a custom system with my own code: Airtable, Zapier, Phantom Buster, Hunter, Drop Contact, LinkedIn, and a few other things, where at that time it was revolutionary. Sales reps would go into an Airtable form. They would just put in their LinkedIn URL for the list that they were trying to build. We would go ping a bunch of different services. We would do our own little mini Airtable waterfall. But it took me, weeks to set that up. And I was basically a full-time low-code engineer, just troubleshooting our own system internally. Being able to replace all of that, and now with things like Claygent and AI augmented in ways I had never been able to dream of, is truly, truly crazy. And I think we're still just really getting started. I think there's a lot of work to be done in this space. And so it's going to get only more and more magical from here.
It is literally magic, man. I mean, what I want to do, a lot of people who'd listen to us, and I understand all the terminology that you're talking about, like let's say waterfall enrichment and how do we build tables and all of that. But a lot of people that listen to us are CMOs and CEOs. So what I want to do, let's think of a story. Now, I know you've spoken about Outbound and how you replaced all of these tools. The simplest application that drew me into Clay, that kind of like how I introduce to people who are totally non-technical. I usually tell them, imagine if you're sending 500 emails to your own customers, 500 customers. Somebody runs X business, somebody is in, let's say, data, somebody is maybe, selling hardware, somebody is doing something else. You could customize the email language to the last LinkedIn post that that guy did or anything else from the internet. And you could talk about that without having to write a single personalized email yourself. Like AI could do that in the enrichment tables. And I mean, that's how I like to talk about it. But could you give it a try? Like, I mean, if I had to introduce it to a CEO, non-technical.
Yeah. Well, so here's like one attempt I'll take at doing it, right? Which is that I think I love the like outbound way to describe Clay. I would even say another one that I think a lot about is we often talk about data enrichment, right? Because the outbound doesn't work if you don't have the data. And so let's say we were explaining Clay to a 5-year-old, right? And I think you have no knowledge of Excel, like anything else. I think you say, hey, all the toys that you currently have to go buy separately and go play with separately at the store, and then put together yourself, and then you have to use only one toy at a time in order to have the entire experience that you want. Now you have one toy that brings together every single toy you know and love playing with into just one place where you can share it with your friends, build anything you want to, and have whatever use cases you want to out of that. And so I think to translate that to the adult CEO perspective, it would be hey, now instead of you going out and buying 12 to 16 different data tools and vendors, and then still having yourself. Buying is just the first step. You still have to duct tape all the systems together. So you're not only spending on actually purchasing the tools, you're also implicitly spending on human costs and labor costs to use all those tools. Cut through all of that, simplify the purchase. You just make one choice because we connect to everything. And then you only use one thing. You use the tool to access everything else. So now the learning curve, the depth of actual needing to use the tool has gone down dramatically. And so you can get back to doing the work that matters most, which is actually being on calls with customers, actually closing deals. And that's where people feel the most fulfilled anyways. I've never met a single person who told me, I love getting up in the morning at 9 a.m., opening up 10 websites and then copy pasting data into a spreadsheet. And it's archaic to me that we still have people doing that in 2025.
I agree. I think it's brilliantly put. I think that the 5-year-old child's example is a fantastic one because that's truly what it enables. And I think you rightly said that it's not just about the outbound use case, but all of the data could connect into a single place, and it just becomes magical. So, what are the current goals? Are you expanding beyond just the GTM crowd that you were attracting earlier? like the agencies that were trying to do the outbound outreach. And I know that Clay was focusing initially on that one. Is that still the focus, or are you building something cool and trying to get other types of audiences to use Clay?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, there's still so much work for us to do in GTM. I think Outbound was the initial use case that started to build our sense of PMF and market fit. But if you even just go to the website now, and that's kind of why I talked about data enrichment as the foundation, I think data unlocks everything. And I think a mantra we've been using recently is that there's two mantras actually. So number one, every good growth idea, whether it's sales, marketing, customer success, or something else, dies without good data and the ability to act quickly on that good data. So I can tell you hundreds of teams that we've talked to who all have some variation of, I wish we could do X, or I want to do Y. And if you dig one layer deeper and ask them, why haven't you? The answer is the same every time. It's limited resources, limited time, because we can only hire so many people to do so many things manually. So in a world where you have tooling that lets you execute your ideas at the speed of thought, you can grow much faster, much more creatively, much more reliably. I think the other thing that we're really passionate about in the GTM space is that there is no alpha in doing the same things as everything as ever. There's limited alpha, maybe at best case scenario. But if you look at the trend of go to market over the last, let's say, 2 decades, cold outbound was the hottest thing on the market 15 years ago. The reason it was the hottest thing on the market is because no one else was doing it. And now that's going to continually shape and change and evolve. Every year, the best go-to-market teams are going to have to figure out what can we do that sets us apart from the rest of the crowd so that whether it's outbound or inbound or expansion or retention or marketing or something else, we are seeing the results that we need. Because whenever you slip into, I'm following whatever the latest cycle trend is, you can maybe squeeze 6 months to 12 months of value out of that, but then you're going to be frantically resetting after that. And your results just aren't going to be as good. And so I think the focus is still very much go to market, in my opinion, but it's much more expansive than just outbound. And I think we've got, as of right now, at least, right, really good ways for people to do outbound, inbound. We just started account based marketing, CRM enrichment. And I think at the core of all these use cases is first get data and then learn how to creatively work with that data.
Yeah, let me tell you one use case of how we used it and how I
Love to hear
discovered
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, close to about 1,000 customers on our platform. And by the way, the first iteration of Edbound was called Nourish, where, we were enabling people to build their academies. And we have like amazing yoga trainers, dance teachers, people building, like I just came across a sketching academy, to different types of, academies built. But it's pretty much like GoDaddy. I don't know what these guys build because there is text that they've used our AI to build on their landing pages. So what I did, I created a web scraper using Clay, populated about 1,000 cells in and enriched them with, like, got the web scraper to visit, crawl every page, get the meta tags and look at what the page is talking about, and use the OpenAI token within Clay and, try and understand, okay, this is what this guy is selling or teaching. Now, this helped me immensely because these are my own customers, but we could never do that internally. Because if every time I thought about it, I was like, if I give them a pop up, they're going to be irritated. I can't ask them, what are you guys doing? And we never focused on building that. So it's just a case where it has helped me understand my own customers better and being able to reach out to them, talk to them, and really kind of find those case studies. So if I'm talking to a healthcare guy now, I just jump back onto that table. So it's almost like a dashboard. And my CTO is totally convinced we're never going to build it ourselves, right? I mean, we don't need to because it's just the cost perspective, the ease of it, and is just brilliant. So that's how I kind of used it. But I mean, there's so many amazing use cases that kind of pop up in my head. We are experimenting with Outbound and customizing stuff. So I think my next question is around that. I think I want to go back to some of the initial projects that you worked on, and I see that you'd also tried to build an edtech product. Is that right? I mean, you were.
Yeah. I've built a few successful ed tech companies. I've built a few failed ones. Happy to talk about any of them. Yeah.
All right. So you leading education at Clay as well now, which is interesting. Us being Edbound, my question is around how does this fit in? Like, imagine a GTM team. Imagine somebody trying to grow their company, trying to get the next 200 customers. How would you design the GTM, and where does education fit in? Would you see that a small team powered with Clay and a platform like ours where they're hosting, all the content, courses, webinars, how does it work? Like, how could they utilize the education angle?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one of the reasons I love the Edbound name for you guys, because I think we could sit here and have a conversation about how education is really at the core of all these go-to-market activities, right? I think if you go interview the best sellers at all of the best companies, you'll find the same trend over and over again, which is that more than sell, what they do is they educate, right? When you hop on a call with an incredible seller, you walk away with new worldviews, new data points, and a better picture of the industry. Because ultimately, what salespeople in today's world have become are really just highly informed educationers, teachers. Let's just call them education teachers.
Coaches. I like the word coaches.
Coaches is a much
That's,
better word. Yeah.
yeah.
So let's say salespeople have become really, really deft coaches in their areas of expertise. And then salespeople are just talking to people who are more generalist player coaches at companies and larger industries, and who need, when they're making a purchasing decision, to talk to a coach who knows everything about just that area and get the full information. I think, for example, right, what maybe would be taboo in some sales cultures is, let's talk about what all your other options are. I think in today's day and world, AI is going to make it way too easy for you to go get all the information that you need. So you can build trust as a salesperson by also educating any potential prospect on the market and the tooling, the landscape, and being honest about what the pros and cons of each decision are. The best salespeople, in my opinion, will also tell you just as readily, this is not a product you should buy if it doesn't meet your needs, because maybe down the line, the product changes, the customer changes, and they'll come back. They'll remember that interaction. So the best salespeople are playing the long-term game. So that's one thought just on education and salespeople in particular. I think as we move into an era of information overload, right? No longer can people just look at an ad and think, oh, I need that product or I want that software. They need to figure out, will that product, will that software actually work for me? Will it solve my use cases? How would I use it? How can I translate it? And so I think, going back to your point as well, how do early teams thinking about trying to acquire customers think about utilizing education in their approach? I think I often think about the educational stages of growing a company sort of in three phases. So I actually think very early on, you likely don't want to create a lot of really large core education materials, because you don't really yet know how best to educate your audience because it's so small, right? So education in the very early days of building a company is actually much more about, let me just hop on calls with every single customer that I can and do the hand-to-hand combat. And that's even true of how we built Clay. We didn't actually pour in time and resources. I didn't do education at Clay until a year and a half into being here and us scaling 10x over that time period. At the very beginning, it was myself, it was Varun, and it was Matthew Kwan. And we were just booking demos with customers and just hopping on calls and having them reverse demo to us, which is also an education tactic, right? If I demo a software to you, it's very much like a core learning philosophy as well. You go to university, you watch a professor give a lecture to you, and you'll retain some of the information. You're not going to actually master or build any new skills until you take that information and go try and do it yourself. But at least in university, my full-time job is just trying to learn material. So there's space created for that. In the world of business and software, I have a lot of other full-time jobs. Very few of your customers are going to go from a demo call with you to trying to tinker around and playing with it themselves. Even those who do, if they're unable to do it, you've got like 5 to 10 minutes. And then they're going to give up and go back to something else that's more value producing for them. So early phase, we're hopping on calls, we're forcing people to use the software themselves because we can see that learning happen in real time. Once you start to get enough of those people, you look at the patterns, you look at the trends of what are we helping people figure out? What are the things that are most difficult for people to figure out? And those become two things. One, they become product insights and feedback for your team to make it more intuitive for more people to get there on their own. And then number two, you can start to focus on, okay, do we build better documentation? Do we build courses online on how to use the product? How do we make this process self-serve enough for the people that want to use it? Because we can't scale by having every single person talk to somebody on the team. And then once you get through that middle stage, and I would say that's where we're at right now, right? We're sort of in like the early to middle stages of scaling this larger company. You're going to see multiple patterns emerge. And so now we need courses for people to go through. Now we need what you were talking about earlier, webinars. Now we want to have maybe podcasts like this and just be able to double down on what we know works and get
Yeah.
out that message to more people.
Yeah, top of the funnel. I mean, get people to find you, get them to understand, push them to the middle of the funnel, and then, case studies and stuff that, I mean, the classic tofu, mofu, bofu approach. But, here is another thought of integrating Clay in a fantastic workflow. I've been talking to a very large company. This is like a Fortune 500 based out of Japan. They did not know about Clay. So I introduced them and I said, when we kind of launch the Edbound campaigns, I think we're going to use Clay because what they do is they meet a lot of people at exhibitions and conferences traveling around the world, right? They put up stalls, and this is an AI product as well. So one of the approaches came out that every time you send a outbound message, which is cold, or they met you once at a conference, you layer it with a free giveaway. It's not a lead magnet because the word kind of disrespects the kind of value that you'll pack in. It's a deep educational piece of content. It could be like a research paper, white paper, deep course that you built. They truly feel valued. And you take on the conversation from there and you put metric behind it so that they kind of read it, and you register them on a platform pretty much like what a newsletter platform would do. So layering it on Clay to fire those messages and to tailor make it how this piece of content would benefit their workflows or companies, I think that kind of is where I feel there's going to be a lot of magic that'll happen.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying too, I love that idea, right? I think what it connects to is this other trend that I think is continuing to emerge, which is that people have to deliver more and more value earlier and earlier in the customer engagement. And so what education can do and education materials can do is deliver that value in a customized, personalized, tailored way. But what it should be is something so magical where if I open up that, piece of educational info, the course, the packet, whatever it might be, it should be speaking directly to me. It's like, I am a revenue leader at a $30 million ARR company. I have a team of 10 and I'm trying to figure out how to get us to the next stage. And this is a packet talking exactly about all the problems I face. It's like, yeah, I have fragmented data sources. I have a bunch of people in Salesforce or HubSpot updating things manually. We run a quarterly process trying to refresh all of that data, and none of it really goes super well. How do I start to think about what I need to be doing there? And you need multiple touch points for that, right? Because in a world, again, with AI, everything will be personalized to the end user all the time. And so if we can do that for the people we look to serve, whether it's through educational materials, the messaging, or likely some combination of all of it, it builds that trust a lot faster and makes someone want to have that conversation with you. Because again, no revenue leader is going to be able to stay on top of the hundreds, if not thousands, of AI tools coming out there. What they then want is the confidence and security that if they come talk to you about their problems, you will give them the best overview of what exists out there to make the most informed decision, whether or not it's your tool at that time. And that's
Yeah.
what the product team is for, right? You want to have the sales and the marketing and the GTM teams be constantly saying, here's our education on the landscape, here's what we think is best. And then you need the engineering teams to be making your product the actual best answer.
Wow. Yeah, that's so well put. One of the features I feel maybe I could not get to that exploration, but once I've enriched data, I don't know if you're building dashboards where I can graphically, look at like beautiful graphs, pie charts, and make sense of the data in a visual way. I think that'll be a cool feature to add. I'm sure you guys are on it already, or you've launched something.
It's definitely one that we're thinking about. We don't have a lot of data visualization stuff, and can't promise any roadmap things on a call. But what I will give you as a short-term hack, which I find very helpful, coming back to the power of AI tools, whenever I do a large en masse enrichment for a table that I want to just analyze, let's say, for example, I posted this on LinkedIn the other day. We are working with newsletter subscribers and seeing how we can help newsletter owners of large audiences, potentially even folks like yourself. So this might be interesting. Figure out who they're actually speaking to, because most of the time, all you get is email data. So it'd be really nice if you could know what are the titles of the people who subscribe to my newsletter?
Oh,
Where do they
yes, yes.
live? How long have they been working there? If you have a paid newsletter, see which ones are paid, which ones are not. If you can see which ones expense it, you can reach out to the ones who don't expense it and see if they're able to get their same companies to expense that exact subscription. So the possibilities go on. If I enrich 50,000 rows of that data on a clay table, it's still on me to go export it all to a Google sheet and make the graphs and the
Yeah,
pivot
yeah.
charts and the dashboards. My recommendation, what I do now is I just download the CSV from Clay. I upload it to Claude because Claude is very, very good at data visualization and coding. And I just ask it, go generate all these slices of data. And then if I have any additional slices that I'm particularly curious about, like I want to see the number of C-suite executives at companies with headcount larger than 500, I just include that in the prompt, and I could show it to you if you want. Incredible.
You mean
It makes it interactive.
50,000 rows? It works fine with that number of data points.
Yeah. The amount of
Wow.
context history is really great in these models, and it's only going up.
Awesome. Well, I'd never tried that, but this sounds super cool. I mean, I think we'll have to give it a spin. Well, here is another interesting example of where, what you just said is going to really work for me that we could never solve earlier. So we had a freemium model for our platform, and we had almost 40,000 people who had signed up on this, right? And these are from 20 plus countries. Now, let's say if I'm going to Bangalore or Singapore, I usually think it would be fantastic to do a meetup. Just call like 50 people who are in this town who had signed up on the platform and, go and talk to them. But we don't have anything beyond an email address because, you shoot stuff and it's not easy to get people to fill. There's going to be a funnel there again out of 50,000. You don't know who all to send it to. So I think it really works well because I know the data enrichment, you have data providers, right? I mean, plugged into Clay, where I could just upload the entire database and query it, look at people who are, in Singapore so that I can then draw down a WhatsApp campaign because that's like 90% open rates. And that's another innovation we have done. We are the only platform that's kind of built innate funnels with WhatsApp as the main communication tool. So you could build it inside funnels. Instead of using email, you use WhatsApp to kind of shoot out to people. And, like 90% open rates magical in this part of the world. I know it's not that popular in the US.
90%, yeah, open rates are magical anywhere in the world, just to be clear.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right that maybe WhatsApp wouldn't be the best channel for that in the US, but I know it's incredibly popular. I mean, my entire family uses WhatsApp to communicate with us still, even though we're based half in the US. And I know I have friends and groups from Latin America, from different parts of sub Saharan Africa, who are all still based on WhatsApp. So I think what you're talking about, which I totally agree with, is in a global world, you have to not only meet people where they need to be met from a personalization perspective, you also need to meet them where they want to be met from a channel perspective. You also need to talk to them where they're used to talking. Otherwise, it's sending a message into the wrong forest, and no one's going to listen to those trees if there's nobody there.
Yeah. So what's the email open rate now? Mostly what do you see? Because I mean, my data talks about roughly just about 14% in this part of the world. So what's the data that you have?
Yeah. So, I mean, the data is hard to just give blanket for email open
Yeah.
rates because the reality is that it just varies. It varies
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
industry, it varies by customer base size, the people you're talking to, etc. What I can say in all candor, like Clay is not a magical solution to email open rates, right? I think it's a magical
Absolutely.
solution
Absolutely.
to anything that you want to experiment on to help your email open rates. But I
Yeah.
have seen
Yeah.
people use Clay and get 1% or lower email open rates. Because what you can also do is you can use Clay to put out a spam cannon if you wanted to, right? And I'm not saying all these
Absolutely.
people are
Yeah.
doing
I
that,
know.
but some industries are harder to crack. Some industries are more difficult. You're going more enterprise, so open rates are lower. I've also seen people build campaigns with like 30 to 40 something open rates on
Yes.
emails.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
And so a lot of it just depends on the data source. Like some of those higher converting campaigns that I'm talking about, I can tell you that the sources are some sort of a signal or a trigger that's time based. If someone follows up right after a webinar, right? If someone follows up right
Yeah.
after a high engagement touch point, we saw you were just on the website. We saw that you just had a conversation with someone at this other company. We saw that you're now hiring for a new job. We saw that You just added this text tool.
You raised around.
You raised a round, right? All of these types of data. I think there's personalization and then there's relevance, right? So personalization is how do I make the information relevant to you? And then relevance is, does it matter to you right now? I can write the best email copy in the world to revenue leaders about data problems and data enrichment. But the reality is, if I'm reaching out, let's say in January, and the company doesn't make any decisions about data tool spend or data infrastructure until Q2 or Q3, they're not going to respond until they're actually feeling the problem because they have a million other priorities. And so that combination of relevance and personalization is really important.
That's golden, man. Now, let's just change gears, and this is an important question. I want to ask you, from all your experience, if a company is trying to get their first 150 customers, they have to go from 0 to 150 customers, maybe in mid-market, right? Like, how would you structure their GTM? I know Clay is going to be an important part of it, but how would you suggest mix up cold, inbound? What would you suggest? And let's imagine they've just kind of started.
Yeah. So if you just started, I would actually say, and let's keep it tool agnostic for now, because I think ultimately GTM is all about the strategy, and then you pick the tools that match the approach best. If you just started, the honest answer is go through your network. Talk to your friends, talk to the people you're already connected to, talk to your investors if you have them on the table, even if it's just a friends and family round. Try and get your initial design partners. Because if you have 0 customers, it matters much more to just have 5 to 10 customers that you can start learning from than it does to start building a scalable motion. And so actually, at 0, you really want to go personal network, design partners, friends, people who are willing to take a risk on you, and then give them special deals, give them discounts, just get the customer information, feedback, and data that you need. And then once you have a couple of early design partners and customers, I would say the name of the game, if you're going mid-market, right? So you're probably building a sales-led motion, is test, iterate, and refine on your messaging. So don't immediately go after a list of, let's say, 100,000 of your dream customers, because the risk that you run is burning through that list real fast and not understanding how to actually build your outbound motion. I actually worked at an agency for a while called J Jellyfish, where we specialized in this. What we did was we embedded alongside Series A, sometimes seed plus stage founders who had just gotten to those initial, 10 to maybe even 20 or 30 design partners and early customers, but not through a repeatable process. They needed to start building a repeatable outbound sales engine. And so what we did, this was back in 2019, so not that long ago, but also pre-AI, pre-Clay, pre all of this stuff, is we had systems and tools set up so that you would go in, and for each of these companies, we would get hyper specific about our hypotheses. Who do we think are the best customers for this particular value prop? And we would get hyper specific about the value prop too. So for every value prop, we're going to come up with 3 different unmet needs that we think the problem is solving. And then our goal on all of these calls is to collect information. It's not actually to sell a product. If we're collecting the right information, if the pain exists, if this customer really feels it, they're going to ask you to buy the product. You don't even have to sell them to it. And I still think that's incredible sales technique today. And what you're trying to get in that stage still is all of the data about the people that you think you want to talk to and whether or not they're the right people to talk to. So let's just take up the hypothetical example of me being the CEO of an AI contract management software, right? I'm going to assume that the unmet needs that my customers are feeling are that they spend a lot of manual time and costs on contract management, obligation management, renewals. I'm going to assume that they feel the pain of missed opportunities, missed expansion, missed renewals. And then I'm going to try and find the people at the companies that I want to reach out to. And I'm not going to blast them all at the same time because I don't have the capacity, even if they all responded, to take 100 calls this week. So we're going to batch that outreach into highly personalized segments for maybe I'll send out, 100 to 200 messages a week and then see what I convert, right? I might even test different types of copy. So I'll send to some people a very highly personalized type of copy. I'll send to some people a little bit less personalized but scaled copy. And I can dial that up or down a little bit easier now because I have AI. So most things should be personalized. And then week 1, what you're trying to test is, are people responding to me? Are people willing to hop on calls? And if you're doing the right job, you'll get at least 5 to 6 calls just from an initial batch of 100 or 200, because that's average, right?
Yeah.
But then the last piece of this process is your goal on those calls is never to sell. Don't talk about your product. And this is the key part of the copy as well. You don't reach out selling something either. You reach out saying, hey, I am the CEO founder of this AI contract legal management company. I admired your background because you've been general counsel at WhatsApp and Facebook prior. You now work as internal counsel at another fast growing tech company. Your background really stands out to me because you're facing and probably know the problems we're trying to solve really well. Could I just grab 15 minutes of your time to learn from you and ask you a couple of specific questions about what you feel in the space? And that then you stick to that, right? You hop on the call when you book those calls and you ask them these non-leading questions about, tell me how you currently handle contract renewals today. Tell me how your team currently goes through red lines. Walk me through the processes. What tools have you bought for legal management
It's
obligation?
more of a consulting approach because I'd been a consultant. I'd worked with CEOs of these large companies like Carrier, and many others around the world, and this was exactly the approach we would take, a consultative approach. But I think brilliant ideas. I think that's a flow that we'll have to visually put in front of people who are listening to us because I mean, there's so many golden nuggets there, to be honest. And I love the way you put it, start there. In fact, there are a lot of large companies that are still trying to figure out and ship new products within their organizations, or iterate on what they've already seen works. And I think the approach that you're talking about even works for those kind of scenarios.
It does. We actually had a couple of large companies as clients as well, basically who had labs, right, or incubators that wanted to
Yes.
launch new verticals or new products. We applied the same approach. And it works incredibly well because it is basically you starting from scratch when you build new products and new verticals.
A lot of CEOs, CMOs that I meet, AI, we know that it's a game changer, that the civilization, us as humans, had never seen something so powerful. I think it'll fundamentally shift what it means to be a human, and I think that's a big statement, but it's like a lot of people agree with this, but it's not something that a lot of these CEOs and CMOs get. They talk about it's overhyped. It's possibly like the blockchain and the NFT fad that came in. You know what I mean? So I don't know if you get that or you meet people like that, because I know the motion that you have at Clay, the filtration process or your top of the funnel to mid funnel is brilliant, right? But let's say you were meeting some of the people like this at conferences and at events where you were going. How are you going to talk to these people? What is it that you're going to say and tell them? What are they looking at now?
I think it's a great question. And it's actually one that I get all the time, right? So I can tell you, even when I was doing the GTM engineering work, which is our sales team, maybe 50%, maybe that's a little high, maybe 30 to 50% of the conversations I would hop on with people coming to us are senior revenue leaders or CEOs or CMOs who are saying, either my board or my CEO has told me, go figure out how we need to be using AI in the organization and then come back to me, or they're on themselves are trying to explore what all the new hottest AI tools are and just better understand what's possible. And I tell everyone the same thing. I think it's up for debate whether or not it's a fad. And I think I fall on the side of it's not a fad. I think one of the problems, if you compare it to crypto versus AI, is crypto was revolutionary technology. It still is in a lot of ways. I'm actually net positive on crypto long term for certain things. The problem with crypto is it's searching for its use cases. And it's also boomed this entire industry of grifters that has made it harder for it to move into real use cases because you have meme coins and people losing money. And there's a lot of get rich quick schemes in crypto. So I think I'm optimistic about the industry as a whole, but I think there's lots of hurdles to overcome that don't exist in AI first. AI, it's a very direct tie to a use case. It's like the same, it's really the same as any other software innovation where if I were to invent, and this is why so many people went for AI SDR, right? If I were to say, hey, that whole prospecting process that you do and the lead gen and the manual copywriting and the research, we're just going to automate it all for you at the same level of quality, if not better, and put it on repeat. That sounds incredibly sexy. And so I'm going to try that. And the reason I'm going to try that is because it's actually not about the AI, it's about the problem you're solving. And that is always going to be true no matter what the innovations in tech are. So I tell CEOs and CMOs, don't go searching for new shiny objects, right? That is the best way to get distracted from the core work that you are doing right now to innovate and to push your customers forward. What you need to do is you need to say, where in my organization could I improve our processes the most? What stands to make the biggest impact on the business if we were to 10x it in quality or efficiency? And then you focus on that area. Maybe it's not go to market for you because every company is different. Maybe it's your internal ops and processes. There's tons of AI tools for that too. Maybe it's the way that you handle customer expansion or account management. Like Clay can be pieces of that, but there's also AI focused tools just for customer success.
Yes.
Or you could do intercom, or you could have decagon. You have all these support ticket systems answering things with better AI, so you have lower headcount. There's tons of problems that every business faces. And I think being specific about here are the problems that will make the most impact to the business helps a leader then go into a conversation and say, I want to figure out if there are good tools that will help me improve this problem, whether or not they have this fancy AI bells and whistles or they don't. And most of them probably will in the day and age that we're coming to. But now
Absolutely.
it's instead of like, let me find the fancy AI tool, it's let me solve a real problem. And let me see how that problem is better solved by a tool that has AI with it.
Yeah, I think brilliant idea because I mean the problem approach really gets you to the right place, and you know that there's a repeat return on investment on something like that, right? And I met people who are into manufacturing, and you know they have these RFP problems, and they're just trying to solve that little issue, you know, customize the RFP every time, and so many people I've heard talking about stuff like that. So I think, yeah, great answer. Look for problems and see how AI could kind of fix and solve some of that. Now, just getting to the last question, what is the one piece of advice? And I know you've given tons of advice. It's all like super cool stuff here. If this is especially about GTM, like if somebody is building the GTM and this is the most important piece that you would give to someone, what is that going to be?
What is the most important piece of advice I would give someone just getting started with their own GTM at a company?
GTM. Absolutely.
So I'm pausing because I wanted to try and think of if there's a better non-biased
Yeah,
answer
yeah.
to
Take
somebody,
take
but I
take all
will.
the time you need.
Well, I'm going to give an answer, and I'm going to recognize that I work at Clay, and so this answer is biased, but I'll explain it. So I think the best thing you can do, and I actually have two or three friends who are good examples of this, right? They're early stage CEOs of companies with, about 100 to 150 customers. And they've been trying to figure out like a sales motion with new customers for better part of a year, actually. They recently hired GTM engineer type people. And I'll caveat this in just a second, who they're not just Clay people, right? And that's why I use the GTM engineer word. They are people who are very good at using tools like Clay. So, look, there's lots of other tools that are in similar adjacent spaces. But if you can hire someone who you know with confidence is going to be very good at using a CRM plus Clay, Unify, Cargo, any of the AirOps, N8N automation tools. The key is someone who can set up experimental growth motions really quickly, test, iterate, learn, and improve, because that is going to most quickly get you to the answer of what works for my business. And you just have to acknowledge that it's going to take a lot of failures to get to what works. And so the main thing that you can waste your resources on is time, right? How long does it take you to do that? You could definitely do the same thing with a really great BDR or marketer, but it's going to take you double or triple the time for them to execute those things manually themselves. And so ultimately, your cost of learning goes up dramatically. And so I think the best thing someone can do if you're trying to figure out your early GTM motion is make sure you yourself are good at being a thought partner with someone who's going to help you build systems to iterate on your creative growth hypotheses. But then do just that. Hire someone or contract someone who can help you test and iterate really quickly on what you think is going to work, learn from what doesn't work, and then find your way to what works for sure quickly. Because then once you have the things that you know work, you can just hit go or text those motions and start to watch the revenue come in the way that you need it to.
That's fantastically put, man. Love the way you've kind of simplified the one action. And I'll tell you one problem here. This is what I commonly see here in the Southeast Asia and to an extent in the GCC region as well. These growth partners or growth engineers that you just, kind of are talking about, it's a rare breed to come across. most of the marketeers that come from the non-engineering world get intimidated by tools and workflows. The best guys I see who can execute what you just mentioned are mostly engineers who have gained a lot of interest in product engineering, growth, marketing, social media. I mean, it's just a generalist, but at the same time, someone who understands engineering. And I think those people are going to make tons of money and get some brilliant results. So I think it's a fantastic advice. And I think Clay maybe needs to also have a partner list of people like that, because I know you have Clay partners. You know, some of those guys are specialists in using Clay, implementing Clay in multiple playbook.
Yeah. Yeah. We have an experts directory. I think you'll see a lot more of those come out. And I think to your
Yeah.
point, two last thoughts I'll leave. One is that you're right. I think a lot of people without engineering backgrounds or mindsets from these industries find these tools intimidating. It's not just Clay, right? It's like using a Zapier, using a Make, using any sort of like
NA10. I mean,
an
the
8
one that you name. Yeah.
Exactly. It's, it's basically you need what I would call a computational thinking mindset to be able to do those things. And I think, unfortunately, the reality we live in today is that, well, fortunately for, I think, me, but I think unfortunately for people who are new to it, AI means, and getting to use AI, that you will have to better understand computational thinking. I think almost everyone's jobs are going to become more like engineering, right? So now GTM used to just be marketing and salespeople. It's always been true that the best marketing and salespeople think like engineers, but it was just easier to get the delta without being that way. And now, as that market gets more and more saturated, other people will have to upskill or learn how to think and execute in this way if they want to stay ahead of the curve. And you're going to have some people with engineering backgrounds who then go into the business side to do that. I also know tons of people who came from the business side, figured out how to think in systems and computationally, and then learn these skills. And I think that's why we have the experts directory, because there's going to be dozens, if not hundreds of thousands of people who tell you that they're an expert at what you need them to do. They sell you some version of the snake oil. You pay them for 3 months, and then you're further down the hole. Actually, that's, I take it back. The worst thing you could do is not just hire someone to do it manually. The worst thing you could do is hire someone who you think is going to do it and then doesn't do it whatsoever. So you've actually gained no learning from it. So I would highly recommend to those people you asked, make sure that someone can do the work you need them to do. It's there's very few GTM engineers that I know today who are good at just doing everything. So you can also specialize a little bit more. And like we even have these specializations on the Clay Experts directory, right? Oh, I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
test on my outbound channel. Hire someone who's really good at building outbound experimentation channels. You want to test inbound channels? Hire someone who specializes in that. If you have the budget because you want to focus on multiple things, then hire a specialist who's a generalist across those things, but recognize that the cost upfront in cash is going to be a little bit higher.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. But it's been fantastic, man. I mean, I've learned so much, and you've been so generous with all the advice and all these brilliant hacks and ideas that you've spoken about. So I think you guys are onto something super huge. I think it's just the beginning for Clay, and you rightly said. I mean, that there's so much that is going to happen, and I think it's a product that we all have fallen in love with. So I'm super excited about hearing from people who are listening to the session now. You know, what do they think about it? And if there are any more questions they would like to ask you, then we'll kind of do a follow on at some point. But lovely, man, thank you so much for taking out the time.
Awesome. Thanks, Kenner. Have
Thank
a
you
good
so
one.
much. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.